to ask Chief, will you do us the honor for the last meeting of the month of the year of hosting the flag? Oh, do we have one more? Okay, well, we'll do it for the next to the last then.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. I need to move this back. It's a little loud. Okay. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Bob Lucy is absent. Marcia Berg-Bigler, Vice Chair.
Here?
Kitty Jung.
Present.
Von Hartung.
Here.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Charlie Moore, Fire Chief.
Here.
David Watts-Vail, Deputy District Attorney.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Chief, we'll move to number 3.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item number 3 is public comment. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment signed in.
Okay, then we'll move to 4. Commissioners, Fire Chief's announcements. Chief, do you have anything?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioners, any announcements? Any comments? Commissioner Hartung?
Madam Chair, thank you. I asked the manager this morning, even though it's not in the manager's purview in terms of fire, but apparently we do not have many, if any, codes in place for Airbnb occupants. And
That would be
so,
correct.
although there may be some consternation, what I'd like to know is what's our liability if we have no codes in place? Should we have some kind of basic codes? If you're going to rent out your facility, it should be at least as safe as a home with working smoke detectors and et cetera. So I think that there's some things that we need to visit on that.
Okay, Mr. Wattsville, could you tell me whether that is something that we should do through the county commission as regulations, a discussion, or would that be an issue to come back to the fire board?
You could probably do it in both.
Okay.
So to the
Yes.
extent that it affects fire, then
Yes.
obviously you'd want fire involved, but to the extent that it covers the rest of the community, other safety issues, then you could absolutely have it at the Board of County Commissioners as well.
And I think one of the biggest places, of course, is
Thank you,
your
Mr.
district,
Westfield.
Madam Chair, and up at the lake. But we do have a substantial number of people down here who
Yes, we do.
rent out for special events, and exactly right. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to be in a position if something does happen to a family while they're staying that we did not have any type of regulations
So
in place.
would you ask the chief to bring that back on a board in the first of the year? And then also, if you would remember to do that on our commission meeting next
Will do.
week.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Got it.
I asked him.
Okay. Thank you very much. Commissioner Herman.
It was on. Okay. I'm just going to ask the same question here that I asked the chief a few minutes ago. Is there any way, since Waste Management's kind of sloughed off some of their duties and the fire people have taken on that job of picking up all the green waste and whatnot, seems like Waste Management should be helping to pay for that in one way or another. Just a comment.
That's a good question. Mr. Wattsvial? See, I knew there was a reason why you and I were here today.
Well, I can't really give you a direct answer unless I could see the contract from Waste Management. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. Our office certainly has, and we could take a look at it and come back to you with an answer at some point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Herman. Looks like, Commissioner Jung, you have anything? Nope. Nope. Okay, we are moving on to the consent agenda. Mr. Chief. Mr. Chief.
Madam Vice Chair, item number 5 is consent items for possible action.
Commissioners, anybody want to comments, want to change something on the
Motion to approve?
second? Okay, do we have any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Chief, item 6.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item number 6 is the IFF Local 3895 report, and the President, Ian Satterfield, is here to present.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so for the record, Ian Satterfield, Local 3895 President. And good morning to you. So this morning first, I wanted to talk about something that really happened that was really neat for us. I think you guys were aware we had the blackjack tournament this last week at the Paramedic Refresher up in Incline. That was something that Local 3895 partnered with Local 2139, which is the Incline firefighters. We raised over $3,700, or actually $4,700 for the Northern Nevada Children's Cancer Foundation. So
Good.
it was a very successful event. We had 72 players, which I want to say was close to a record, and it was quite a good time. One of the other things I wanted to bring forward to your attention, and I think it's something that you guys have had on the forefront for quite a while, but talking about dispatch. It's something I think that, honestly, that we all have. It's a difficult adaptive challenge. It's not a technical challenge, and one that we can fix with just technology. So with that said, I would hate for us to get trapped in the current way we do things, only because that's the way we've always done it, or that's the way it's always worked. So with that, I would go out and state that our EMS dispatch system is inefficient and ineffective. I'd like to continue to first put out and state that I believe our dispatchers themselves are do an exceptional job. I don't believe it has anything to do with the quality of work that's being done by our dispatchers. I think they are stuck with the system that they have to work with. And I hope I'm not going to bore you with kind of how the process works, but I think it's good to reiterate to everybody on how the 911 system works, and that it's really the first point of contact for someone that's having a medical emergency. So as of right now, when that 911 call comes in, it goes directly to Reno 911, where they take the call, and they go through the process of determining who the caller is, what their phone number is, where they're at, and their chief complaint. At that point, the call then is pushed over to Truckee Meadows dispatcher via the screen. So our dispatcher never actually communicates or talks to the actual person on the line. The Reno dispatch then transfers the call to REMSA's dispatch, and REMSA's dispatch continues to do the EMD process. So I think with just that alone, you can see when you have that many steps and that many people that are involved, mistakes can be made. So with that, I wanted to kind of reiterate some of the issues, and these are just stories of challenges that I've had personally as a captain at Truckee Meadows with the dispatch. And the first was a call I was at Station 15 in District 15. It was just for a medical emergency that was a call that was really close to the fire station. Came in as a sick person. So we leave the station and we head around the corner. And just as the time we pull in to the incident, dispatch gets back on the line, our dispatch, and says, REMSA contacted him. This is a domestic dispute. You need to stage out of the area. Well, as you can imagine, we had already popped the brake, and there's a person out waving out in front of us. So we were able to diffuse the situation and didn't have to try and back out of it, which was a good thing. But I think, as you guys can see, there's some definite safety concerns with that lack of communication. So another story I have, I was working at Station 18 out in Cold Springs. A call came in as a patient with difficulty breathing. So one of the things that we do as we're on our way to the call is we'll take that basic information and we'll kind of prepare ourselves for the call, whether it's the equipment we need or just mentally preparing ourselves. Now, granted, there's oftentimes the call is different than what is stated. And in this case, it definitely was. We walked through the door, and REMSA had the family on the phone giving pre-arrival instructions for a cardiac arrest. The father was on the floor. They're doing CPR, which we then, jumped into action and went through our normal stuff with that. But as you could see, if we'd had the information prior that this was a cardiac arrest, we would have brought a few other tools in our toolbox to the call that would have made it more effective and more efficient. The other piece to that call was that REMSA did take 22 minutes to get to us. They were coming from Disc and Vista. The last piece to this, or last story I have, and these are all ones that involve me, so I'm going to venture to guess there are more out there amongst the fire service, is there's often times where we'll get called to a call, and we'll pull up, and REMSA will already be on scene, and we'll walk through the door, and they'll say, hey, we tried to cancel you. We canceled you 5 minutes ago. Didn't you guys get that? And well, obviously not, because we're here. And it works both ways. I was on a motor vehicle accident the other day out in Spanish Springs, but lo and behold, the driver of the car ran off, so we really didn't have a patient. And so we canceled REMSA, and about 7 minutes later, you see REMSA coming code down Pyramid Highway, and we're asking, well, we canceled you 7 minutes ago. Didn't you guys get that information? And obviously they had not. So that kind of brings me to this second phase of this, and that is, I think we've had several reports done over the years, specifically one that the Tri-Data report that was done back in 2012 that addressed a lot of these issues, and that was obviously 5 years ago. One of the comments in it and statements that were made is fixing dispatch needs to be a top priority, and I would go to say that I'm not sure we've really made it a top priority. In it, it's gone and stated that recommended that 911 dispatches should be combined in a central countywide resource so that all data is collected in one central location with single methodology. And I think that is a key piece there. One of the other recommendations is implementing an automatic vehicle locator, the AVL program, throughout the county and adopt closest forces principles. It also goes on to recommend that the EMS communications be all on one radio, being the 800 megahertz, which REMSA is still not on. I think the function of public safety in our community can be substantially improved by the integration of data and communication systems. Now, these are just a few of the recommendations out of the 10 that were done by the Tri-Data report. And I think it's time for us to really take a stand and work on this adaptive challenge, because it is one that involves people's beliefs and emotions. It's more than just a technical fix. In addition, the other report that does state and talks about dispatch was the Blue Ribbon Committee report done in 2014. And it, again, stated that we need to do a centralized dispatch center. So with that, I'm going to leave that piece to you and go on to one of the more fun things, and that is I do want to go out and just say thank you and congratulations to our new hires, our newly promoted folks. They work really hard to get where they are now. They have a lot of work ahead of them, but I'm excited for them. It's a really special part of the fire service. And then finally, I want to just say that I'm looking forward to working with our new deputy fire chief. I think it's going to be good for Chief Moore, take some workload off of his shoulders. I can't believe he's done the work he's done in the last 8 months without deputy chief. So with that, I'm all done speaking with you, unless you have any questions or...
Thank you, Mr. Satterfield. Commissioners, anybody have something they want to add? Commissioner Herman?
Sorry. Do you have any idea, just a rough guesstimate of what it would cost to bring REMSA up to standard?
I do not have an
Okay.
answer for that. No, I don't. I wanted to bring bring the problem forward for us to start looking at and getting back to the table again.
Okay.
Okay, interesting, Mr. Satterfield, that you would bring up dispatch, because as we end out this year for the county commissioners, our county manager is asking us each as commissioners what we think the #1 issue should be for next year, and I said dispatch. So you and I are obviously on the same page on this issue. And so we do have some stuff that we are putting in the works now, and hopefully sometime next year. I think you're absolutely right. This is not just an issue of safety for our firefighters, for our police department, for the city of Reno, for EMS. This is a safety issue for every citizen who lives in Washoe County. So it is an issue that we have got to resolve and solve in some manner. And so I appreciate you bringing it forward to us.
Yeah, and if there's any help that Local 3895 can do, we're here to help.
You bet. We'll call you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chief? We're on to item number 7 now, and that's an introduction of new employees. And I believe, Commissioners, we get to go down front and shake each of their hand.
We do. I'll introduce our new employees, and I'm very, very proud to introduce, and gentlemen, come on up, if you would. Mr. Shane Bohatch, firefighter paramedic. Mr. Tyler Ewald, firefighter paramedic. Mr. Derek Jackson, firefighter paramedic. Mr. Alex Rodriguez, firefighter paramedic. Mr. Ryan Rudder, firefighter paramedic, and Mr. Anthony Syro, firefighter paramedic. So it's very good. Could we do a photo up front?
I know, A-Rod. Yeah, you're probably making a lot more money there than you are here. Well, and dating J-Rod. Yeah. You're on back, all the way back.
I just want to make you look smaller.
Thank you.
You
used to look tall. Congratulations. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Good to meet you. You bet. Laying on the desk. Awful. In fact, it's even under the desk. All right. Chief?
Madam Chair, I'd also like to introduce our newly promoted employees, and we're going to present them with their badges. Josh Cutts has
We'll lean
been
over.
Josh Cutts has been promoted to fire captain. He's going to be pinned by his mom, Laura. And Ryan Whitlock has been promoted to fire captain. He's going to be pinned by his brother, Corey Whitlock. So gentlemen, if you'd come on up.
Super.
Remember, push the pin straight in. You got plenty of paramedics in the room.
I have a hair in my eye. Thank you, guys.
And now I'd like to introduce our new mechanic, Timothy Collins, who's pinned by his wife, Michelle Bean, and Brett Lee, who's our new fire prevention specialist. He'll be pinned by his wife, Sylvia Lee.
Look at these beautiful little girls. Aren't they adorable? I want a Christmas dress like that one.
Kitty, I think that'll fit you.
Yeah. Too cute. Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. One more. All right. Thank you, Chief. Okay,
Madam Chair, for the record, there is no public comment on that.
there is?
There is
There
no.
is none, okay. Okay. All right, we are moving on to number 8.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item 8 is a discussion of possible direction to staff on the fire chief's report to include operational matters and activities for the months of October and November 2017 for possible action. First, the green waste program has been an overwhelming success. We had, just this last weekend on November 18th, we collected an estimated 245 tons of waste, which is pretty astounding, and we're still involved in trying to masticate and chip and recycle all the material that we collected. So it's been a massive project, but nevertheless, I don't think there's been one singular program that I've been involved in my career that received as much praise from the citizens as this. People do want to create defensible space in their homes, but the problem is that there's so much volume of it. How do they possibly get rid of it? To take it to the landfill is difficult just from a logistics standpoint, and that's also a considerable expense. So this program has been a pilot program for us. It really has been a test. The numbers of people that have shown up, literally we've had horse trailers full of green waste, and most of our 4 sites have been filled to the brim. So we have 4 tools that we brought to bear on this. We have a masticator, which the district has owned. We bought recently a new chipper, and then also a new burn box. So we use the burn box for large logs that can't be chipped. We use the chipper for branches, and then we use the masticator for sagebrush and other small debris. Once it's been treated into chips, we'll either provide that for free to the public if they need some for their barns. They'll be free to come and take it. A lot of the leaves and the other smaller debris we've taken to RT Donovan for recycling. So we're very proud to say how much we've actually taken in. The first time we did this, I think we had somewhere around 185 tons. So you can relatively estimate that 1 ton equals about 1 acre. So we've treated almost 500 acres, where the citizens have treated themselves 500 acres of their property, which has been an extraordinary effort. I need to mention the hard work of my staff, especially Chief Ica, who's been out there running the masticator. The crews on the stations have done a lot of work helping people unload their debris. Also, the volunteers at Station 221 and 223 put in an enormous effort. So where we go from here, I'd like to bring that issue back to you at some future agenda to see if we want to continue this program, and if so, what resources we'll allocate towards it. But definitely the citizens have said thanks, not only to me, but I know that they probably sent you a few emails. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to have a fire-safe community, encouraging defensible space and making it easy to create that defensible space is a key component.
Yep.
I'm also pleased to announce that the district and Captain Chris Black have been recognized by the Nevada Donor Network, and you can see our trophy there next to the podium. I want to compliment Captain Chris Black. He was contacted by the Nevada Donor Network about creating a partnership between us and them, such that when we arrive to find a deceased person, we make a contact with Nevada Donor Network, and they do the rest with contacting the family to see if the patient could be viable for a donor, a possible donor. We attended a lot of our staff members attended a dinner hosted by Nevada Donor Network, and some of the people who have benefited from organ donation has literally changed their lives. Where they couldn't see before, they can now see. Where they needed a kidney and were close to death, they were able to get a kidney. It's a remarkable program for the state of Nevada, and the district is very, very proud to be a part of that. So my thanks to the good work of Captain Chris Black. I don't believe he's here today, but nevertheless, I wanted to mention what a great job that he did for the district in that regard. Finally, Commissioner Hartung had asked for a facility projects update. I've given you a brief spreadsheet in your board packet, but as I've talked to the county, Bill Wardell, the county architect, and the facilities team at the county, it seems to me that really where we need to go as a district with regard to its facilities is we need to start a master plan. And that master plan needs to evaluate each station with regard to its present condition. We need to see how many useful years of life we have in each of our stations. We need to see if there's any short-term or long-term improvements. And we also need to make sure that the station's in the right place before we spend a lot of money on any particular station. So this spreadsheet that I gave you really is just kind of just to start the discussion with the board and to see if you have any comments going forward. But I think this process will take a good 3 or 4 months. We are engaged with the county to talk about admin. Our space upstairs in Building D, we're completely full. We've added employees, and we just have no more room to grow. Even if we were to add employees, there's no more office space. So we're looking at the possibility of adding an admin building in the county complex that might be freestanding. We have a lot of options there. We also rent our warehouse for logistics and fleet maintenance. So at some point, we probably want to take that money that we're spending in rent and redirect it towards debt service. So we build the building that would actually work well for us in the long term. And of course, our fire stations, 17 in Spanish Springs is getting fairly old. Station 13 needs some assistance and it's getting fairly dilapidated. Station 30 in Bowers is on leased property with the state of Nevada. So there's a whole long list of facilities we need to address. So over the next few months, we'll be bringing this agenda item back to you and giving you a progress report. But nevertheless, it needs to be a comprehensive look at all of our facilities and give you a 10-year plan on where we're going to go.
Okay. Commissioner Hartung, any questions?
Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. And I've got some on all of these, so I can certainly wait. But in terms of the facilities plan, Chief, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Wattsvial. Are we in a position today to ask the chief to bring us back what would be entailed on a master plan and a facilities plan, or can we just give him that direction?
Well, you could probably do both. You could ask him to come back with a plan that includes A, B, C, D, and E.
Okay,
You'd have to vote on it.
okay. I mean, can we vote on it today, or does it have to be agendized?
Well, you're underneath the fire chief's report still,
Okay,
and.
okay, understood. All right, I withdraw the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
But I do think you could
So
ask to
I-
bring it back and possibly include some other.
So yeah, Chief, I'd like something that the board can look at, you know, some long-range planning and trying to understand where we're going to go, what those facilities needs are, rank them. You know, if we can, if it's something that's absolutely instrumental in performing our day-to-day operations, I want those higher ranked, of course, at the top versus, you know, things that would be cosmetic.
Understood.
And then I have some other stuff on the other items, but I'll wait until we're done with
Okay.
item 8, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item 8, B and C are the career statistics and volunteer statistics. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Okay. Commissioners, anyone other than Commissioner Hartung have any additional questions? Commissioner Hartung?
So, Chief, you know, first thing, the green waste program, are the Donovans charging us to deliver our material that they ultimately compost, are we delivering that just in sort of whole form, or have we chipped it, shredded it, so to speak, and is it pretty much ready for them to utilize?
RT Donovan does charge us a tippage fee. It's somewhere around $150 for a 30-yard dumpster, so it's a high volume, but the cost is fairly minimal.
30-yard dumpster, and tell me the fee again, Chief?
From memory, Commissioner, it's about $150.
150,
per dumpster.
okay. How many dumpsters do we deliver there per season? let's
By the
just
time
say?
we're done with this, we'll probably have between 16 and 20.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm trying to remember the bulk of your, rest of your question, Commissioner.
No. I mean, we're chipping it before we deliver it to them. So I mean,
We are.
we're not just delivering them, sort of raw green waste that they have to process. It's pretty much ready to put through their process.
It is, yes. It's all
Okay.
been chipped. And,
All right, that's what I needed to know. And how, on the green waste program, how does a constituent get a hold of the service? Let's just say somebody needs you to come out and use the muncher on their property. What do they have to do?
We'll look at those on a case-by-case basis. I understand the cemetery in Washoe Valley has quite a bit of sagebrush that local ROTC
Yes.
group did to
From
clear
Spanish
up
Springs.
and yes,
Yeah.
and spruce up the cemetery. So what we'll do in that case is either take the burn box or the masticator there
Okay.
and then chew it up, and we'll remove the waste for them.
Okay.
So it's we look at that as a case-by-case basis. We've had a number of people ask us also, could we come by and pick up? For whatever reason, they may be elderly or they may not be have the means to take the volume, and
Yes.
we'll look at that as a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
But long-term, we may want to look at fees if we do individual pickup. I know that could be pretty onerous for us to do logistically because we don't have a lot of people, but based on the sheer number of people that showed up at our stations, I think people are very, very eager to come
Sure.
and dispose of their waste and for free of charge.
Well, me personally, I would not be opposed to paying a fee or giving a donation or something of that if you were to come out and masticate some sagebrush on my property. I mean, that's a service that I would normally have to pay for. Although we're not trying to compete, what we're trying to do is create defensible space. It's still a service that somebody would normally have to pay for. So I don't think it's out of the realm of asking for a fee, but we could form it phrase it in the form rather of a donation. Just can you make a donation of X amount? And if you can't, no big deal. It's just a basic thing. So, and then I'd also like to commend everyone who has worked on the Nevada Donor Network. As many of you know, that has directly impacted my family. And, our daughter is the recipient, she's not a cadaveric donor, or a recipient rather, but live. But this is, donor is so important. I cannot tell you, I watched my daughter sink near to death on numerous occasions, and it was really wrenching for my wife and I. My wife was the donor. I'm not trying to pound my horn, but she just graduated from medical school. That's how much it changed her life. And you just don't know which person is going to go out there and make a substantive difference. And so anything you can put into the donor program is greatly appreciated by the Hartung household. Thank you so much. And thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Any other commissioners? Anything else? Okay, I believe we need a motion to approve the chief's report.
So moved?
Any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chief?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item number 9 is discussion and possible approval of an employment agreement for Scott M. Gorgon to include salary and benefits for the position of Fire Deputy Chief of Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, and authorize the chairman to sign the same. And then if the board's action is to approve, I'd like to introduce Mr. Gorgon to you.
Okay.
So moved?
Any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the employment agreement of Scott M. Gorgon. And so now we get the pleasure of meeting him. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
It's been a long 8 or 9 months not having a deputy in place, and I'm very, very pleased to have Scott here. It was an exhaustive process over many months to look for the right person. Scott is not only very, very familiar with our operation, he grew up in Carson City, correct? And now is coming back home, so I'll introduce him to you formally and ask him to say a few words.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to start a new part of my life, and it's interesting making a full 360 back to my roots. Grew up in Carson City, schooled here in the Truckee Meadows, and worked in Carson City for a while, and then decided to go down to Southern Nevada to work for the last almost 25 years. And so having the opportunity to come to a fine organization is that we find here in the Truckee Meadows, and to work for you and the chief, I'm excited to get started, and look forward to talking with each of you individually over time. Thank you.
Welcome and welcome home.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you. Okay, Chief, we're on to item 10.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item number 10 is approve the 2018 Health Benefits Program for district employees, dependents, and retirees at an estimated cost of $1,579,206, and authorize the Chairman of the Board of Fire Commissioners to execute all insurance contracts and service agreements pertinent to the Health Benefits Program. This is for possible action, and I'll ask Cindy Vance to present this item to you.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Cindy Vance, Chief Fiscal Officer. I think we started probably late October, early November, actually late October, we met with LP Insurance regarding our renewals for health insurance for the district. LP presented us with, of course, the renewal option for Hometown Health and plus other options to change providers. Originally, we were presented with a 27% increase from Hometown Health. The LP Insurance was able to negotiate that down to 21% increase. The other option that was viable was United Health for a smaller increase over a prior year. We did meet with the unions and the other employees, and based on discussions with all the employees in the unions, it was determined that to stay with Hometown Health was the best option because they could keep their same providers and not interrupt their insurance. Along with this renewal option includes dental benefits from Discovery. I'm sorry, dental, they are, is that Discovery? Sorry. Guardian, thank you. Guardian is the dental insurance. That did include a 9% increase, and it's the exact same insurance as we had prior. Vision was stayed exactly the same, and health insurance stayed the same. We are renewing at this time also our employee, what is it called? Sorry. Thank you. Employee assistance program that was renewed a little bit later in the year. Last year, it was done in early 2017, but we're renewing that at the same time for a cost of $34.72 for the whole calendar year of 28. Sorry, that's last year's rate. Sorry. Vegetable spending. I know where my cost is. The total. Sorry, it's up here. Total cost of the whole insurance package was $1,579,206. This was about, like I said, estimated 21% increase over a prior year. We did budget with an anticipation of 20%, and we believe that this insurance package is the best fit for our employees, and the cost is within our budgeted amount. So we do recommend that you accept this proposal.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments, questions? Commissioner Jung?
Yes. Is there a reason why you don't partner with our large organization and provide insurance through us?
We actually met with HR yesterday and had that discussion, so it is something we would like to look into for next year.
How many FTEs is this for?
I think approximately 130. I do have that exact number. 80. 82, 38, and 10. Do math in my head, 92, yeah, about 130.
Okay, and you said it's going up by 21%.
Correct.
How does that compare to the county overall, what our insurance is going up? Do you know?
I do not know.
Do you think we should find that out?
Okay.
Because it sounds like you're getting hosed, as far as I'm concerned.
Our LP insurance, when we met with them, they said our problem is that our size is small and that we don't have a lot of pull, so we are kind of, they can do the best negotiations they can, but since we are small, we don't
So
get the
I
best
think we
rates.
should have it a future agenda item is wrapping you up in our full county
Okay.
to save
Hopefully.
you guys money and your employees money as well, because this to me 21% increase is unacceptable. Now I don't know, I haven't been in insurance negotiations in a while, but we used to think 9% increase was too much. So I don't know if the world has changed. Oh, am I getting pulled over? Okay.
No. He's got the numbers for the county. He negotiated for the county.
Do you have the numbers?
No, I don't have the numbers.
Oh.
I just have a comment, but I want to let you finish.
What?
He has a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Where is that?
Truckee Meadows isn't part of Washoe County at this point because it would have to be negotiated into each of the contracts with the labor associations. Health insurance is a mandatory subject of bargaining, and it's certainly something that could be explored in the next round of negotiations.
So are you saying in an obtuse way that they have not been interested in?
No,
This CBU has not been interested in rolling into our county-wide insurance, like the health district is in county-wide insurance. There's lots of other auxiliaries that are.
No, absolutely not. I don't even know whether it's been particularly broached with the associations at this point. I think, but it's, again, it would have to go into the contract one way or the other. And we have contract negotiations coming up with Local 3895 in February of next year. And as the contract is currently written, both sides need to come to an agreement on a health plan, which is how we ended up here today. Everyone is aware that there are increased costs, and there are different ideas floating around for how to decrease those. One of those would presumably be seeing whether or not there's an appetite on the part of the associations or any of the other employees at Truckee Meadows to join with the county's plan, which would hopefully reduce costs. But it's something they would have to agree to.
But it's not something they've been offered.
Not at this time. It's not been discussed.
Is there a reason why, Chief?
I think the consensus among employees that they're very satisfied with the plan.
So they like paying 21% increase in-
But obviously
that we mostly pay for?
that's not sustainable, obviously.
No.
So as Ms. Vance said, that we did have discussions with John Listinsky yesterday, and this is something I want to bring up with the two associations, is when you have more members in a
Volume, right.
an insurance pool, the volume helps keep your costs stable. So I understand that the county has like 5 different options within its health insurance. So going forward, obviously, that's something that we have to negotiate with 3895 and the Chief Officers Association about.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the county's been very successful in keeping its costs under control.
Okay,
The broker does tell me, though, that mostly it's because we're a small group.
absolutely. Yeah, so I think that for further direction,
Yes.
that this needs to be part of the negotiations of their insurance and the cost corrections and ways to make this sustainable. And there should be many solutions, not just the one I just came off the top of my head, right?
Correct.
But maybe they can go in with a different organization. But at this time, this is not sustainable and frankly not acceptable for a 21% increase. Thank you.
Commissioner Hartung, thank you, Commissioner Jung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Commissioner Jung. It seems fairly high. What are our options, Chief and Mr. Wattsfield? Can we do some type of a bridge until we do negotiate? And you know, sort of work it backwards? It would seem to me, I mean, we have very good insurance, I think, through our Employees Association, and if there can be some type of a savings, I mean, I would certainly want to just bridge until we can come to that point. What happens with that, and what happens if we don't approve this?
Well, I understand an insurance contract is essentially month to month, and that if we start negotiations with our labor groups and we decide to come back into the county, we can do that at any time.
It is month to month.
During the time.
It is month to month.
Okay.
So we are going to begin negotiations with 3895. Their contract expires at the end of the year. So obviously that's something that the district is interested in talking to the employees about, and I know that health insurance is very important to all of us, but in a way that we can afford to provide the best insurance possible going forward. So
Well, and sustain it.
and sustain it.
And that's the whole key. Doesn't matter what organization we're talking about, it's got to be sustainable.
We have had a
we live
few
inside
shock
of a
claims
budget.
within our group, and because we're small and because we've had shock claims, this is probably why we're looking at 21%.
Right, I mean, we've got to live inside of a budget. We don't just, you know, Truckee Meadows doesn't just have an endless pool of fund that it can draw from no matter what. You know, we live inside of a budget, which is a good thing. It's a good thing for taxpayers, and it's a good thing for the department. It keeps everyone accountable. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Commissioner Jung, did you have something else?
I'll move to approve this with the direction that we've given come February and authorize the chair to execute all of the contracts.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Mr. Tim Layton.
Okay. Mr. Layton, good to see you.
Hey, Commissioners, Tim Layton for the record. And Commissioner Jung, I think you're onto something. We are getting hosed. And the reason why I say that is, you know, I'm reading the staff report here, and it says that the bids were evaluated by the Health Benefits Committee, which consists of members of the employee associations, administrative staff, and the fire chief. There is no retiree sitting on this board. And with these 21% increase, to put it into perspective for you, it goes from 9,200 up to 15,000 from 2017 to 11,440 to 18,303 for a retiree to pay for health insurance. And as Commissioner Jung stated, there are other options out there. Why aren't we partnering with bigger agencies? That's what's going to get our costs down. There's one option for health insurance for a retiree, and it's the plan that I got an email on yesterday that stated that we have open benefits enrollment. There's no changes to your current health, vision, and dental plans with this renewal. However, there's a price increase. Yeah, a 21% price increase. But why is there no other options for us of a high deductible plan? And I want good insurance too, trust me. I understand the value of having insurance, but these costs are outrageous. And the employees, yes, they're getting paid 100% and then 50% for their dependents, but that's not the case for a retiree. And you take a retiree that's paying a third of his income for health insurance, this is not sustainable. And I think that there needs to be something done. There should have been something planned ahead of time. You can't do it at the end of October and the beginning of November and go through a process and vet it out and provide options to the employees or the retirees that need insurance. So I encourage you to act on it of what you're saying, get us into a bigger pool, get us into the county's health insurance plan, and give us other options than more than one option of paying $18,000 a year for health insurance of a 21% increase. It's ridiculous when we do have other options available. And I still think that they can provide a high deductible health plan to us this year and not just be stuck with this plan and move on. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second on the floor. And we have discussion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jung.
I think that that's a really good point, that on your insurance negotiating committee, that all end users are represented. So a retiree should be appointed to that. I'm not necessarily saying this retiree, but that needs to be something that your board comes back with, because if they're, now, you don't want them to take over the whole thing, because we used to have that over at the city of Reno, where the retirees were running everything. But you do want them to have some input as to how this affects their contract, which I consider they're still under contract because they're ours. So an idea, flush it out, tell me best practices, and come back with some more information if you don't mind, Mr. Chief.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hartung, did you have something else to add? Okay, I wanted to point out, guys, that I believe when we first started looking at renegotiating the county insurance 2 years ago, we were looking at 27 to 24%. It actually ultimately ended up lower than that, although I don't know that it was significantly lower than that, maybe in the teens, low teens somewhere. But unfortunately, we're dealing with increased healthcare costs across the nation, and that's impacting insurance in the state of Nevada. I did see that we have recently got a reprieve here in Nevada for health insurance, and so hopefully that will, impact positively for everybody other than just the indigent. So we're hoping that that will go across the board. So that's my comment. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Chief, you've been given direction, and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Chief, we'll move on to 11.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item 11 is authorization to freeze one vacant fire mechanic, one logistics assistant position, and to create one additional fire mechanic position. The background to this, Madam Vice Chair, is the district's fleet requires an additional mechanic. We did have an assistant logistics assistant, but we think we're better served by freezing that position and having a total of 3 mechanics on staff to be able to service our needs.
Okay. Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Chief, are we creating one more fire mechanics position, or is this the one that we just filled today?
This is in addition to.
This is in addition to, okay. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to
But
be
no
sure.
net increase in the total census.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments from the commissioners? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Chief, we're on to 12.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item 12 is discussion, acceptance, and possible direction to staff regarding an informational summary finding and recommendations report on Lakeview Incident TM 16005937, presented by Mike Brown of R&R Partners for possible action.
Thank
Some
you.
background is this structure fire occurred in August of 2016. The board's obviously heard lots of concerns from the community, and we've had substantial discussion on this. I initially hired ESCI to do a summary and a look at the circumstances regarding this fire, but it was my view that they did not do a comprehensive enough study, so we shifted directions to Mike Brown, who obviously has a lot of local knowledge and a lot of expertise in this matter, so I'll turn it over to Mike Brown.
Mr. Brown, welcome.
Good morning, welcome. Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. This morning, I'm going to give you a summary of the informational summary findings and recommendation, as Chief Moore mentioned, on the Lakeview incident that occurred on August 2nd of 2016, located at 345 Lakeview Drive, which is in the Verdi area. And the first portion of the report goes through times. Spent a lot of time listening to the tapes and going through transcripts to ensure everything was accurate. And the highlights on that report are highlighted in red. And a lot of those had to do with responding apparatus, as well as the incident itself, and then the closure of the incident when it was finally called that it was under control at that time. I start off with the finding recommendation number 1, which is the dispatch. Truckee Meadows has a contractual agreement with Washoe County to provide dispatch services. They have an agreement that the calls should be received and dispatched within a 60 seconds or best effort time. This was done on this call. It was done in less than 1 minute. Time of receipt of 911 call to dispatching to the appropriate resources. The records indicate that the incidents are exact. There was some question about the times, but after reviewing the tapes as well as the records, the times are exact. The dispatcher assignment provided information received from the information to fire personnel on this incident, but also dispatched and logged other incidents. So one thing to take into point is that while this fire was taking place, the county still had to take care of other incidents, and they did it in a manner that was acceptable, no doubt about that. So the recommendation was that if it was recommended, staff at Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District share information following any incident in the form of action review with dispatch personnel associated with the incident to better educate and make improvements to the dispatch system. And I can say in the past history of knowing and running a department is that we often overlook the dispatchers after these incidents are done. But if we involve them with an after-action review, especially major incidents, there's room for improvement on both sides, and a lot of times that can be found. Finding recommendation number 2 is the District 35 engine response. So Engine 35 personnel received the overhead dispatch at 1909. Engine 35 responded from Station 35, which is located at 10201 West 4th Street, the Mogul area. They went in service in 1910. Engine arrived at scene at 345 Lakeview Drive at 1917. So time of dispatch to incident arrival was 8 minutes and 33 seconds, with a travel distance of about 5.1 miles. And taking into consideration the afternoon, getting on and off the freeway, and then the other vehicles and people moving around that had to get out of their way. So with a system of cover response recommendation response time, that was, well, I'll explain the system of cover response. System of cover response was done on Truckee Meadows as well as other fire departments throughout the Washoe County area several years ago. It was advised or recommended that time should not exceed 10 minutes from time of call to on scene. So with that being the system of cover recommended response time of not to exceed 10 minutes from time of dispatch to equipment on scene, there were no other recommendations required for the response of Engine 35. So finding the recommendations of actions of the Engine 35 personnel. So on arrival at 345 Lakeside Drive, they reported a large structure, 3-car garage, fully involved in defensive operations. Now, the fully involved was the garage, and that's what they could see from the street view of that. And there were some pictures provided in the past that actually gave a good description of what was taking place here. Following the interviews with the crew from Engine 35, it was quite clear that once they deployed a 2.5-inch attack line and attempted to take the heat out of the fire, they realized that they were not going to have enough water to efficiently and successfully extinguish this fire. So Engine 35 captain chose to provide protection to neighboring exposures for potential fire movement from involved structure to the vegetation and possibly other nearby structures. So no recommendations for decisions of Engine 35 crew on tactics and strategy. Their actions were dictated by insufficient water demands, and captain and crew acted efficiently. Number 4, the findings and recommendations for water source. Most of the apparatus in the area, the engines, carry 750 gallons of water. For this fire, it would have been optimal to have 2,000 to 3,000 gallons to successfully extinguish this fire. The structure located at 345 Lakeview Drive and neighboring structures do not have hydrants, and homeowners rely on private wells to provide water to their homes in the area. Early on in this incident, water was of concern for not only the crew of Engine 35, but also the thought process of the responding battalion chiefs, as evidenced by their prompt request to have tenders respond from other stations under the control of Truckee Meadows, and also to request assistance from the Sparks Fire Department and the National Guard. So they were thinking the whole time that the water was going to be of need, and that wasn't a thought process of the crew on scene, but also the battalion chiefs that were coming as well. So eventually, with the help of the Verde volunteers and other on-scene engines, Reno Engine 11, a water supply was established with over 3,000 feet of 5-inch supply line. A drafting evolution was established, and 1 hour and 22 minutes from time of dispatch to water supply. So it took a long time to get a water supply effectively established with the assistance of many of the folks that were on scene. Now, I want to note that the City of Reno Fire Department, Station 11, is located at 7105 Mayan Drive in Reno. Reno Fire Department was requested by Battalion Chief 3 to respond to Type 1 engine at 19:54:34. So this request is 45 minutes and 34 seconds following the initial dispatch of all Truckee Meadows engines for this incident. Station 11, Reno Fire Station 11 went en route at 19:58:28 and arrived on scene at 20:07. So roughly about a 9-minute response for them from Reno Station 11. So immediate recommendations is that the closest forces concept be initiated and utilized neighboring agencies that have closer proximity stations on initial run cards, not only for this incident and area, but all locations served by the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. It's recommended that a water tender be placed at Station 35 and respond to all working fire notifications. And I'm happy to say that when I was interviewing the folks out at Station 35 several months ago, I did see a water tender there as well as personnel to operate that. So that's already one of the recommendations they've already put in place. And future recommendations. Commissioner Hartung, when we last spoke, and I was here in front of the commission, spoke about the entire area of Washoe County, not just Verdi. So I tried to fashion this in essence to where it could be used anywhere within the responsibility of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. So the future recommendations is mobile portable water storage services strategically located for quick fill of tenders for fire events, evaluation of businesses in the areas that have water storage system for sharing of water in the event of a major fire of any kind, and then a pre-plan of all districts, but using the Verdi area as a template to establish pre-incident surveys of available water sources that may be utilized in the event of an incident. So many private water sources are available, such as swimming pools, potentially cisterns, and possibly other mobile or fixed sources. So it would be recommended that the fire service personnel explore communities for these water sources opportunities by walking the communities and establishing relationships and knowledge of access and egress for such opportunities. There was question about swimming pools that potentially were available next to this incident, but not knowing where they're at and pre-planning the ability to utilize them makes it very difficult for personnel. And I know when folks are feeling frustrated that we have that and you can't use it, but if we don't pre-plan for it, you don't know about it. So that's one of the areas I think that should be looked at. The Verdi volunteers, they played a significant role in this incident and the ability to provide water support throughout the drafting evolution utilized. You know, the Verdi volunteers are an on-call pool of personnel and, if trained appropriately, can assist with tender response and support from the volunteer station located at the old Verdi Elementary School. One of their areas, work with developers of future construction sites to establish water supply in the form of hydrants to be utilized within the Verdi area or other areas of the county. Just drive out Old Highway 40 and you'll see the growth that's taking place out there, whether it be city, whether it be county, whether it be the California side. If this growth is taking place and they're moving water closer and closer to be utilized by any public service agency, we ought to be out there with them making plans for that utilization. And then potentially in the future, maybe tapping into those resources as systems start to fail. And what I mean by that is wells start to dry up and other types of problems that we start seeing throughout the county and other jurisdictions. So finding recommendations on agreements. Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District has numerous agreements that allow for mutual aid and automatic aid with collaborating agencies. And I think this is something that was educational for a lot of the folks that we spoke to out there. We have the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chief Agreement, we have the several agreements with California and then Nevada Master Mutual Aid, but then we also have agreement with our partnering agencies. So there's a lot of agreements that year after year get looked at and upgraded as they are needed. So it's recommended that Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District surrounding agencies work to establish boundary drops that would allow for all agencies, equipment, and personnel to cross jurisdictions for service of the closest station or apparatus and personnel to better serve the Truckee Meadows communities in Washoe County. AVL, it was mentioned earlier tonight, automatic vehicle locators. It's the gold standard in the industry of public safety. It would be advantageous for all public service agencies to explore and incorporate AVL for their responding apparatus and stations so computer automatic dispatch CAD systems programs can direct the closest forces to incidents of any kind that require immediate incident responses for a variety of critical time-sensitive emergency incidents. And it's not just fires. The CWPP, Community Wildfire Protection Plans. Well, it revealed that the last evaluation completed for all Truckee Meadows fire protection districts was accomplished in 2006. So it's recommended that the CWPP be updated for all districts within the responsibility of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. I mentioned the Nevada Network of Fire Adaptive Communities a few months ago. Nevada Fire Adaptive Communities, in association with the Nevada Division of Forestry, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, and members of the Board of Fire Adaptive Communities. It's recommended to establish a chapter within the Verdi community so as to assist the community for fire threat analysis, community and residential fire and fuels reductions. So this is a new program. It's taking the place of the Nevada Fire Safe Council that went bankrupt several years ago. We got 170 chapters throughout the state of Nevada, and we want to keep those chapters active. And so with that, it's recommended that we establish a chapter within the Verdi area and other areas of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to assist the chief and his personnel with their fuels reduction issues. Along with that, they can assist with grant writing, acquiring grants, but then also working with those communities to create a fire adaptive community and keep things safe. It's recommended a fire service representative be assigned as a community liaison and establish a relationship with the communities for assisting with education, commitment and understanding of the needs of the community, and ability to provide direction and insight within the community. Chief Moore has done a lot of work throughout the entire district, all Truckee Meadows districts, but it's overwhelming when you have a lot of people asking questions and looking for FaceTime with individuals from the fire department. So I think if we could push that over to some type of liaison person representing the district, that would be of great assistance to the program. The volunteers again. It's very apparent that the housing of the equipment and personnel for the volunteer ranks needs to be modified in several areas. The current station located at the old Verdi Elementary School has several issues that render it incapable of providing the housing and services that are required for the safety and convenience of the volunteers. The location is ideal, but the ability to provide for sanitary restrooms and water, as well as needed upgrades to the building, remain a challenge for the volunteer ranks and I know the fire district. We talk about recruitment all the time. It's not only a problem here within Washoe County, Northern Nevada, the state of Nevada, it's a nationwide problem, getting people to volunteer. So with that, Truckee Meadows Fire Protection should run a recruiting program locally for volunteers within any of the districts that have volunteer recruiting stations and needs. This would combine and show support across the entire district. Volunteer positions should have job descriptions for identified needs that can vary from full suppression requirements to identified special positions. For example, water tender support, logistics support, and programs that are modeled after the community response teams or CERT programs shared with the Washoe County Sheriff's Department. Emergency preparedness guide. Talking to a lot of folks at Verdi, when we talked about if there was an incident take place, how would you be notified? Where would you go? How would you leave? Who would tell you to leave? So in coordination with Washoe County Emergency Management, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, the City of Reno Public Safety Agencies, a guide for preparedness for disasters should be put together. The need for our customers to know how to be notified in the event of a disaster in the area, evacuation routes, and shelter-in-place locations is very important. Such emergency preparedness guides should be developed and provided with training to all communities throughout Washoe County. It'd be advantageous for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to explore future station locations with collaborating public service agencies, such as potentially the City of Reno, Reno Fire Department, United States Forest Service, and responsible law enforcement agencies that provide service to the Verdi area. Along with that, if you're working with partnering agencies, especially in building stations, you have opportunities for grants. Grants can be applied for that meet the funding criteria and so often are found favorable when shared with agencies that have similar needs for housing and staffing of equipment and personnel. So with that, I'll take any questions, but I just would like to mention that this has been several months going out and working with the community, meeting with community members, and exploring options. There's been a lot of good that's been done already. I know there's a lot of discussions that are taking place about water delivery demands. The county did an excellent I got to say, overview of all of their areas of responsibility when it comes to providing water. I didn't look at that till after the report. It actually has some of those comments that I made about cisterns and portable water supplies in there as well. And then also working with contractors, engineers, and such to see if we can get water and other types of hydrant systems where they're not at today. But there was a lot of folks from Verdi that were very interested in this. They live there. They want to see us safe, and they want to see things improved. And I got to say, it was great talking with them. I enjoyed it, met a lot of folks, got to hear a lot of the issues that are taking place. I didn't realize how much growth is taking place in the Verdi area. I didn't realize how much commercial industry out there, as well as those commercial buildings that do have adequate water supplies with storage that could be potentially tapped in a time of need. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate it. A very comprehensive report and well put together. Thank you. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Brown, and I'll always call you that. Is there anything that could have done in terms of the response that these guys could have done that would have saved this home? Because look, I mean, every agency, and I don't care, I've talked to every agency in the region. Everyone has had losses. This isn't a pass. It's not a, gee, it's okay. There are always extenuating circumstances. I know in my own garage, if my garage happens to start on fire, you know, I've got oxygen tanks and acetylene tanks and, you know, those kinds of things, because those are the kinds of things, you know, I solder and weld and et cetera. And if my garage were to go up, holy moly, it would really exacerbate the issue. Plus, you know, lacquer thinners and paint thinners and paints and all of the common things that I'll bet you virtually everyone has in their garage. So is there anything these guys could have done that would have made a substantive difference?
Notification on part of property owners. Okay. So some type of a system that alerts them, which they did have, but okay, from what I've seen and read, this fire started on the exterior of their building and then moved interior.
Yes.
So they were behind. As far as what I mean by that is that the first arriving engine, as well as everybody else that tried to suppress this fire, were playing catch up from the very beginning.
Yeah.
The fuel loading that was involved with this incident being 50% involved, the lack of water, yeah, they were playing catch up throughout this entire call. So we've all experienced fires like this in our careers. Yeah. They're very difficult.
There's one going on in Southern California right now.
Exactly. Yep. And, you know, I think that to answer that, no. If they could have been stationed right in the front yard and knew the fire was taking place when it did, yes, we could have made a change on that, but it's not the way the systems work.
It's
so,
why I bought a house with a fire hydrant in the front yard.
There you go.
That's not meant to joke. It was one of the things that we looked at when we purchased our house. We were like, this is great. And I did have a similar incident in 1988 where the back of my house got started by a Sparklets bottle. And I had shake shingles on my roof, and blessedly, they had a water supply. Yeah, well, it's what we had. I know, I had kindling on my roof. It's now gone.
Tried to get rid of those. That's part of that fire-safe community.
No. Yes. And Station 17, you know, they literally saved our home with a minimal amount of damage on the back of the house. But it was that response time and the availability of water, and you know, blessedly, you know, both were relatively short. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks,
Thank you,
Chief. You did a good job.
Hartung. Commissioner Herman, did you have something you wanted to add, since this is your district?
And that's just what I was going to say. This is my district, and I feel a little responsible for not being aware that, you know, water was not readily available there and the system wasn't perfect. Hindsight, of course, 2020. But we were just not prepared for a fire like that, because available water is number one. That's why I've tried to work with the chief here and get a system going so we could pump water out of the river or have water available there. in storage. So I just feel, I always look back and say, well, what could I have done? And I am on this board. So I do feel like we really got to be prepared. Fires are horrible. I'd hate to fight one for sure. I would not be able to. I couldn't even put the uniform on, as we found out. So anyhow, I'd like to hear the public speakers, and see what they have to say. But I do feel some blame because of where I am. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman. Commissioner Jung?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Chief Brown, for your report. And thank you for taking a countywide look at all of parallel situations. I like your attachment. I think it's A, or Table 1, where you're doing the community risk and hazard assessment results. I don't think we've ever had that comprehensively. And I think the next steps are, Mr. Fire Chief, is that we go out to each of these communities and create some sort of action plan that he has suggested in terms of a liaison and, education and those basic things in your extra free time. And I do want to know what has happened with the automatic vehicle locators. We've been talking about this since I started 10.5 years ago. Is it a cost issue? Is it a contract issue? Who has it, who doesn't in the valley?
Well, I can't speak for all the agencies that are represented through the dispatch center. I heard earlier mention of dispatch, and I think that would be something that would be at the top of your list when you start looking at the dispatch issues, as was mentioned here in the upcoming year. There is a cost associated with it, but again, those costs, when you look at effective response and, people's lives that are on stake, I think we could absorb those costs and justify them, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. So who has it? Does REMSA have it?
REMSA has it?
Does TMFPD?
No, not to my understanding. AVL? No.
What about Reno?
We don't have AVL?
Okay, Reno? You're here, do you have the automatic vehicle locators? Just nod or shake your head.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking at you, I was looking at your guys behind you. So Reno has it, REMSA has it. Sparks?
Can't speak to that.
Is Sparks here?
Yes.
Sparks has it, okay. Oh, boy. Incline?
Yes.
So it sounds like we're the only one without it.
Chief Moore?
If I may clarify, Madam Chair, we do have the technology. All the agencies have the technology. In fact, the dispatchers can see the location of any fire unit and any police unit because I can see it on my MDT.
In any REMSA unit?
REMSA I can't, but I can see any fire unit on my MDT in my truck. So the technology exists. The problem is that there needs to be some technological improvements, but we need to be in agreement between Reno and Sparks and us to use it. There are some technical impediments between us and Sparks because they're two separate dispatch
Of course.
locations, but from what I understand and talking to people with the technical knowledge is that we can put AVL in place in a matter of a very short time. It's just going to require some agreements and some decisions to move forward on this. Now,
So how do we expedite that?
well, I understand the county's looking at this, and there are a lot of technological hurdles to overcome, a few, between REMSA and between Sparks. I think that they can be solved. But there's no reason why we couldn't have AVL between TM and Reno, for instance, because the dispatchers sit in the same room.
I think maybe we'll talk offline off of this because it sounds like it's political will and cooperation that's going on, that's not going on here. And we need to take this very seriously. Again, this has been recommended forever. And I don't see any movement. And if that means we're going to have to use the Board of Health to make this happen, we'll figure it out, because they're the ones that overlook the response times and and go through the data, because that is a best practice, and we know that. We didn't have to hire Chief Brown to tell us that that was what we should be doing. We already knew that. I'm getting on it. And then you say, work with developers of future construction sites to establish water supply in the form of hydrants to be utilized within the Verdi area. And I know this was specific to this incident, but also we should be looking at the whole rest of the county where development is going in. And, you know, usually developers like to give us a structure or, you know, whatever, but maybe we need to be negotiating and be more at the table. Maybe it's at the Regional Planning Governing Board where this is asked for the developers to do that, because obviously that Verdi project is not Washoe County. That's a Reno project. So I think that needs to be taken back to the regional planning. If one of you three could make a mental note to ask them to start doing that. And then you talked about, when we talk about developers making concessions, maybe we should ask the developers also who build in those areas, when there are needs for volunteer stations, that we ask them to put money towards, or land to, or, you know, labor, whatever, to bring those up to code. I don't want anybody staying in an unsanitary place. I mean, that's not the way this county operates, and certainly not this fire district. So that's another area we could look. And one other area I'm thinking about, you know, all of the marijuana players in the unincorporated county are always asking me, what do you need money for? What can we do to make this a happy community? Now, in Verdi, you don't have any MJ anything out there. Oh, you do? You have one. See, that must be the city of Reno. Who is it? Cultivation?
Yes.
Cultivation, okay. Well, they haven't spoken to me. It's usually the retail people that speak to me, but we need to start saying, to go to them and say, hey, listen, you want good fire here, why don't you kick some money in, if it's for the system so that we can see each other, or to build a new firehouse for volunteers or career, and then also to figure out and fund that community liaison position, to be going out there to figure out all of these, the proper evacuation routes. Do you know who to call? Do we know how to get a hold of you? I mean, literally, in Sun Valley, the two marijuana dispensaries are always asking me, what do you guys need? Do you need sidewalks? Do you need more hours for the swimming pool? Do you need this? And I think that they have a lot of money and a lot of cash that just sits there, and they need to get rid of it. Huh?
Literally.
Literally, they have that. So, Chief, maybe you and I can work on that, and along with the county manager, because it's not all going to fire either. You know, there are other issues in each of these hamlets. I feel like Verdi is like a hamlet. It won't be for long if you see all of the construction going on there. So those are just some ideas, and let's cultivate those partnerships that we have and hit it ahead of time with developers to put in the fire hydrants. And I also believe Truckee Meadows Water should be involved in that and paying for the maintenance of their fire hydrants like they do for Sparks and Reno. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Chair, Madam Chair. Future, thank you, Commissioner Jung. Thank you, Commissioner Jung, very much for your comments. I think they're excellent and well-placed, and I am really excited about seeing the findings on this report, and I know some of these things are already in place and are happening, and I hope that we will take this report on a point-by-point basis and be able to go through and really start acting positively on some of these things that are so important. Without question, AVL is very important. I hope it will be something that's right at the top of the dispatch issue, which we clearly have got to resolve, not just because, as I said earlier, not just because it protects our citizens, but because it protects all of you. You know, to send firefighters into an area where they don't know what their water source is, they don't know, you know, the dangers, the potential dangers, that is just worrisome to me. And I think with AVL and being able to see each other and know where everybody's at and really having a dispatch system that works, that some of that problem can be addressed and resolved. And I would like to see us move forward in that manner. Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And You know, Commissioner Jung, you brought up hydrants and et cetera, and, you know, placement of hydrants, that occurs in a planning process, and that occurs in a developmental agreement. The stuff that's going on in the city of Reno, of course, that's in their purview. But I do think you bring up a good point, and I think a cogent argument could be made as to why, even in our own developmental agreements, especially on the outskirts of the developments where they push hydrants for wildland, if nothing else.
Asante is a good example.
Asante is a good example, but we also have a number of places in Spanish Springs where, when we see some final maps, I think that it could be a reasonable thing to have hydrants available in some of the very, on the ends of some streets, where you would think that it's not very useful, but in reality, they can be very, very useful. So I think that there is some opportunity there, and I think that regional planning could have that discussion. And, you know, I don't think any agency, other than the apparatus that's used to hook up, because I know that there is some differences in the city of Reno versus Washoe County. Does the city of Sparks have a different coupler than we use, Chief, for hydrant hookup?
I'm not sure, Commissioner.
We'd probably have to ask one of the firefighters. Who is it the same as ours, Mr. Satterfield? Okay, it's just ours is different than Reno's. Is that correct? Oh, it's the same? Oh,
There are a few areas that have.
yeah. Come up, Ian, and tell us the coupling, because I thought that when I was at Fire Ops 101, where you guys put me in the burning building and then left me there.
I could probably help out Commissioner Hartung on that. The areas that do have a different fitting,
Yes.
supply that to all the agencies around for those mutual aid and automatic aid responses.
Okay.
So if, like, the city of Reno does have a hydrant system that has a different appliance hookup.
Yes.
They've always been very, very helpful in supplying that to
Oh,
other
no,
agencies.
the inference, there's no inference
Yeah,
that
no.
it.
But they make it work.
there's
That's one area where we make things work in the fire service throughout this area to make sure that, you know, water demand and supply
Yes.
can be acquired by any of the agencies that normally respond in here.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't stress anything more than that.
Okay. And so in those developmental agreements, I think what we could, and regional could be the agency that has this discussion of how do you make hydrants available, even though they're on the edge of your jurisdiction and you know, while it may not, let's say, be in the city of Reno or in the city of Sparks, they both have always been, and even more recently, have been acutely aware of wildland issues. All three agencies have had to deal with wildland, and so those outlying hydrants could certainly be a good resource. At the end of the day, though, you know, the cisterns that we've discussed, I believe, are the responsibility of not, and I'm probably going to get some stones thrown at me, but I don't think they're so much the responsibility of the county. They are the responsibility of those people who choose to live in those outlying areas. I chose to live out, away. It's now caught up to me. They found me. But you know, initially, I mean, years ago, we lived out in the hinterlands, and we understood that we didn't have the same response times for police. Fire, we did have Station 17, so that was a true blessing. But I knew that if we had to call an ambulance, it was a friend of mine died on the Pyramid Highway. It was a 20-minute ride for him, and that's just, you know, he died of a massive heart attack. You just can't get him into town fast enough. But we accept those differences. Thank you, Commissioner Jung, and the lack of infrastructure. And so I think that the broader conversation comes back to, look, if you want this as a community, we create some type of a special assessment district, because why should we force the people in Sun Valley to pay for fire service for the people out in, some outlying area. And I'll use Spanish Springs as that example. I mean, I'll defend it. I would love to see more resources up there, but the people who live up in the Highlands, that's what they choose, that's the lifestyle that they've chosen. And they all have wells, and they all have their own private roads, and that's that's the lifestyle. So I think that there's some tough decisions to be made here, and people have to step up to the plate and say, yeah, this is what I want, and if that's what you want, I mean, I'm happy to engage in that conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. You know, Chief, based on the meeting that Commissioner Hartung and I had with the staff and the consultant for Regional Governing Board, that in fact is what's coming up. I mean, as developers are proposing developments in and around the greater footprint of Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, they have to put them on municipal water, municipal sewer, and therefore, hydrants are part of that. I don't think this discussion really applies to the greater footprint. It more applies to the outlying areas where there are going to be single-family homes built and not, not a development, if you will. But it is something that we have to consider, but I totally agree with Commissioner Hartung that this is not something that taxpayers throughout the county footprint should pay for. The people who live within the footprint of the city of Reno should not have to pay for a cistern for somebody who decides to live in Red Rock or wherever out there on the outskirts of Washoe County. The people who live in the city of Sparks shouldn't have to pay for the people who live out down in the South Valleys. Each individual place has to have responsibility for what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, just as Spanish Springs has responsibility for its stormwater situation. And so, I mean, this is not a politically comfortable place to be, but it is reality. And we have a responsibility as the fire board and as commissioners to remember the fiduciary responsibilities that we have sitting before us. And so I really like your comments and I really like what you have to say, but I think there's a bigger conversation that we're going to have around that. And I think, Chief Brown, you did a marvelous job on this. I've been calling you Mr. Brown just because I know you so well. But thank you for everything you did. Commissioners, anybody else have a comment?
One last thing, Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
And Chief, and I think Chief Brown, Chief Brown made some good observations here. Perhaps we do need to identify all the places where water sources could be potentially available, whether they're a swimming pool or a pond, for that matter. And I don't know how we incorporate that in our overall plan, but I think it's a reasonable look at potentially a resource, and especially in the outlying areas. If hydrants are available, I don't think it's a big deal, but you have to identify those places where those kinds of water sources would be available.
If I may, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
please, Chief.
Characteristic of the Verdi community is that they probably have, as a rural area that is not served by fire hydrants, at least the 300 and so structures, there's abundant water in Verdi. There's the canal, there's the river, there's swimming pools, there's the ponds, and the regional park there. The issue is getting that water from the source to the scene of the fire.
Sure.
And so our technology that we have is limited to water tenders. So the problem at hand here is trying to figure out how to get that water from the static source to the scene of the fire, and there are distances and time to overcome. So arguably, we did have to flake out 3,000 feet of hose to this fire. Even with more cisterns, there's still going to be that problem of getting that water to the scene of the fire. So until municipal water comes in to where we have hydrants close, I mean, that's just simply the technology we rely on: hydrants, water, and access.
Right.
And I would also mention that Chief Brown did an excellent job for us on this, and I'm very thankful to have Mike's work on this, and a lot of good points for us to use going forward. I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay, Chief, and I'll just close with this. You know, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we don't swing the pendulum so hard in the opposite direction of saying things like, all right, you want to build a home in an outlying area, you're going to have a cistern. We're going to
Right.
force you to put, or fire suppression. We're going to force you to have those kinds of things. Now, and then everybody says, well, my God, now it's going to cost me another, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to build my house. And so I think we have to be, sort of cognizant of that. And then where does that conversation stop? We could enact a code and enforce where people have to go and put in a cistern now in an existing home, which would, or put in, right, retrofit for fire suppression, which again is that hard swing of the pendulum. So I think it has to be a balancing act. And that wasn't a suggestion that those are the kinds of things that we do by any stretch of the mile. The suggestion is I think we have to look at every single incident and try to do as best as we possibly can every single time. And that's really what it comes down to, and understand what all the parameters are. And I don't think there's anyone in this Corps who does not care deeply for their community. Period. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner
Chief.
Hartung. Commissioner Herman.
I just wanted to interject one thing, and that is that even the rurals pay taxes for fire on a pretty equal basis. So we do have responsibility.
Not all of them, but yes, you're right in some respects, but yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I would tell you that the development that I live in, Washoe County and Truckee Meadows Fire Protection, did not pay for the hydrants in my area. That was paid for by the developer. And that went into the cost of my house, that infrastructure, to have a municipal water supply. So therein lies the difference.
Well, I think the other factor you have to consider is the cost associated with how much tax is being paid for various different things versus what the overall cost is. And so there are a lot of factors you have to look at. You can't just say, well, I pay taxes. Well, I live in the city of Reno and have a huge pool in the backyard. Guess how much I pay in water fees? So, yeah. Yeah, it'll freeze over. So, I think there's a lot of factors we have to look at, and I know that, Chief, as you start working through this, and now that you've got a wonderful deputy chief who's going to be working with you on these issues, I know that you will look at all the factors that need to be involved. And so I would just ask that as you move through this report and make increases or changes or whatever, that you would make sure you keep us up to date on exactly what's happening, and so bring a report back as part of your chief's report on a fairly routine basis, so we know where we're headed, and we can talk, knowledgeably, as if you will, about this whole issue. Chief Brown, once again, I want to thank you so much for this great report. I think the commissioners are all really pleased with it, and I know Commissioner Lucy is sorry that he has the flu and can't be here to hear this report, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have Mr. Tim Layton, followed by Ms. Carly Borchardt.
Good morning, Mr. Layton.
Good morning, Commissioner. Tim Layton for the record. And I just wanted to do the same thing you did, is commend Brown for the informational, thoughtful, detailed report he put out. But if you read in this report, there's one thing that it doesn't directly say, but it's screaming it to everybody, is regionalization. And I know you don't want to hear it. I know we don't want to talk about it. I know the whole deconsolidation, but if you look in the final immediate recommendations that he says about AVL boundary drops, there was the second engine on this fire, engine 15, drove past engine 1, engine 2, engine 4, engine 5, engine 10, engine 8, 11, and truck 1 to be the second engine on this fire. Where you were talking about a 3,000-foot hose lay, that takes 3 engines. Each engine carries 1,000 foot. So you could have had 35, 11, and whatever the third engine would have been, and there could have been a water supply laid probably within the first 15 minutes, not an hour and 12 minutes, whatever it is. But this is going to continue to happen. And there's one thing after another, whether it's the Hidden Valley Fire, the West Fire. We had a rescue there. So we had a big fire, we changed, we put an engine company there. There's a big fire in Verdi and Lakeview. Now there's 4 people on that engine company and a water tender. We have 5 people working out at Station 15. That, you know, and there's another thing in here that we preach on every fire that we go on, and it's about safety of the public and the first responders. Well, that first due company, Engine 35, responded, pulled at 250 gallons a minute, so you have maybe 2.5 minutes of water available. They elected to go to the exposures, which is the right thing to do. I mean, maybe this is a loss. But when you stand there for the next 12 minutes, where you can't do anything, your hose limp, no water, and Engine 11, which was dispatched, according to their response time, arrived in 9 minutes. They would have been 27 seconds behind Engine 35 as their second due company. They could have laid a water supply. They could have used tank water. This is going to be a reoccurring problem, and it's going to take events like this all over the community. Commissioner Hartung, it could be out in District 17. That's the biggest district that Truckee Meadows has. There'll be a catastrophic event out there, and we'll put more manpower out there. I agree. There needs to be 4-person engine companies on here. Truckee Meadows is at the end of the road throughout the whole entire county. And one last comment is if I was with the city of Reno Sparks, I wouldn't agree to these boundary drops. There's no benefit to them. They're the ones that are the hub. They can put the personnel on scene that they require for 1710, 1510, whatever. Truckee Meadows has a hard time doing it. They would be supplementing the fire service to the county if they elected to do this boundary drop. And at me, as a City of Sparks citizen, I wouldn't agree to my engine company.
Thank you, Mr. Layton.
Going out in the county all the time to protect citizens
you.
in the county. Thank you.
Ms. Carly Borchardt, followed by Tom Dunn.
Good morning, Mrs. Borchardt, or Miss Borchardt.
Thank you. Very nice to see you guys. So I just want to clarify something and get this very on the record. What the Verdi community has been requesting since this fire in August of 2016 is a plan. I'm an accountant. I'm not a firefighter. I know nothing about this stuff. But what I do know is you need a business plan. And right now, we do not have an action plan. We were talking about the medical marijuana, or it came up. There is an above-ground, huge water tank right in the middle of downtown Verdi that the trucks can tap into at any time. They just need to talk to the owner. That was a Washoe County requirement. So I feel like the conversations need to be had. I really appreciate Mr. Brown for coming and actually doing this review and providing this analysis. But again, I just want to reiterate, our request is to have a plan in place to know where are we going, how are we getting the information. Everything that's been discussed today is good and fine, but we need to get it going. The discussions are being had over and over, month after month, and still no plan is in place. So I just want to reiterate that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tom Dunn.
Good morning, everybody. For the record, Tom Dunn. For full disclosure, I'm a full-time professional firefighter for the city of Reno. I'm the vice president of the Reno Firefighters Association. I'm also a district vice president for the Professional Firefighters Nevada. But here today at the podium, I'm speaking as a taxpayer and a resident of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. 2 years ago, I stood up at this board and talked about the SB 185 issues, about, when we were talking about automatic aid agreements, mutual aid agreements, things like that. One of the things I talked about specifically at this podium was that in order to be successful in those endeavors and to bring both agencies forward in a mutually beneficial situation was to have joint policies and procedures on some of these issues, whether it be water supply, fire ground suppression, things like that. Along with that was also joint training. And since I was up here 2 years ago, I can tell you neither of those have occurred. So that takes a conversation between the policymakers as well as the individuals among all levels of the fire departments to make sure that moves forward. If we want to be successful and we want to protect lives, we want to talk about public safety, we want to protect the residential dollars that are on the tax roll, we need to have joint policies and procedures on these issues. There also needs to be joint training among the agencies. Talking about station locations, this has been an issue in this valley for 30 years. There's been multiple studies, whether it be ESCI or some other group that has come in talking about where Sparks should put a station, where Reno should put a station, where Truckee Meadows should put a station. You know, those are all historical records that, you know, the policymakers and the staff should probably go back and look at. This is a continuing issue that has not been addressed to this point. Going back to the issue of the fire out in Verdi, you know, you had, in District 35, you had Engine 35, Engine 15, Engine 13, Engine 36, and Engine 351 that were all appropriately dispatched to this fire. However, as a point of fact, the city of Reno has fire stations and apparatus that are much closer than 15, 13, 36. That's Station 11 in Charlins and Mayan, Station 8 at Kings Row, Station 10 in North Virginia, Station 4 at 11th and Ralston, Station 5 on Mayberry, Station 1 in downtown Reno, and Station 2 on Sutro. Those are all geographically and road-based miles closer than some of the Truckee Meadows stations. So once again, going back to, if we want to improve fire service, we need to talk about some of these issues. Is boundary drop an issue? Or is boundary drop going to be the end-all, be-all? I can't tell you that. But you need to have a conversation on how we're going to improve fire service and public safety in this valley. And one of the last things I have is, why did it take 45 minutes to request mutual aid from the city of Reno? You know, it should not take 45 to 56 minutes to dispatch engines that are closer that can provide potentially a better outcome to the taxpayers and the residents. If you want boundary drop, it's probably going to require joint policies and training. And if you call them, they will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Appreciate you coming forward.
That is all.
Okay, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Commissioners.
I'll move to accept Chief Brown's report with the caveat that the chief take all of the feedback that we'd given today and come up with the plan region-wide, and also look at joint training, because I do believe that, just like with health insurance, the higher volume of people you have in a training class, which is very expensive, the cheaper the actual per person fee goes down. And these guys that are on the front lines don't get into all this political stuff that we do, and need to have that friendship as brothers so that they trust each other on the fire when everybody's getting called in. So I would love to see the joint training. We all own the regional training center, so there's no reason why Sparks, Reno, and TM cannot train together and save costs for all of us across the board. That's my motion.
Do I have a second?
Long-winded second.
We have a motion and a second. We've done public comment. Any additional comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chief, we are on to 13.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Item 13 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item.
Anything, Chief?
I do, Madam Vice Chair. We will have a meeting on December 19th. An agenda topic I will be bringing you is our progress with the City of Sparks on automatic aid enhancement. The City of Sparks Fire Chief and I are in complete agreement on sending the closest unit to the scene of the call. And we're making, we've had some setbacks with Tiburon. There was an upgrade that corrupted our ability to clone calls and send that to each other. So earlier I spoke about technological impediments. We are working past that, and I believe by the end of February we'll have a fairly good system in place. Not the best system, but we're getting there. But I also want to mention that the record is replete with calls where one agency is closer to the other. A respiratory arrest 900 feet from a Truckee Meadows fire station where we were not called. A cardiac arrest perhaps 50 feet from our station and we were not called. A vehicle accident with people trapped and the vehicle's on fire, and Station 14 was probably within 800 feet and we were not called. So if we're going to make the system better, then absolutely we need to get to AVL and we need to have greater cooperation. So a lot of discussion about this Verdi incident, but nevertheless, there is a lot of record out there which could be brought forward if you want to direct me to do that. But nevertheless, I think the public would be shocked on the number of times that one agency can serve the other and they're not being dispatched. So
Thank you, Chief.
I'll bring that to you on December 19th.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners? Commissioner Herman? Commissioner Jung? Any comments? Commissioner Hartung?
Well,
Just can't resist, can you?
no, I think Chief is absolutely spot on. And I completely agree. There are a number of scenarios where other agencies could have been called. So I think Matthew 7:3 is perfectly adept in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. I would just also make the comment that houses are going to burn down sometimes if they're right in the middle of the city, and houses are going to burn down when they're out in rural areas. It's an unfortunate part of what we live with every day. Largely because, as Commissioner Hartung indicated, we store things in our garages that we probably, in better sense, should not have put there. But again, if there is a problem between TM Reno, TM Sparks, TM whoever, that problem is not just one-sided. That's a two-sided issue. And we as professionals, who our job is to offer a service, and we stand up and agree to offer a service to take care of our constituents. And you can see I'm looking right at my firemen and the Reno firemen, and you guys are without question outstanding. You do fabulous work. I'm very impressed with all of you. I like your union representatives because I think they've got level heads. I like the unions. But the fact of the matter is, we have a responsibility, you have it and we have it, to take care of our constituents. That's our job. And that means that we leaders have to come to the point where we can negotiate deals and we can work together. This is not the responsibility of the boots on the ground. They don't care. I had the opportunity to be up in the Collin fire, and when the houses were burning up in Collin, and I had the opportunity to talk to several firefighters, and they frankly said they didn't care whether it was a Reno side or a county side. Their job was to put the fire out, and that's their job, and that's what they went to school for, that's what they want to do, and they do an effective job of putting themselves in the line for it. This is a political problem that we have here in this community, and that means it's incumbent upon us as the elected officials to work with the other elected officials and the chiefs to get together and let's fix this problem in the long run. We can resolve a lot of issues if we just put politics aside and start doing our job. That's my comment. Anything else? All right, Chief, we're on to our last public comment.
We have Mr. Tom Dunn signed in.
Mr. Dunn?
Good afternoon, members of the commission. Tom Dunn, for the record, Truckee Meadows resident, and also I'll be speaking on an item that came up before, the insurance issue with Truckee Meadows Fire. As a member of the City of Reno Employee Advisory Insurance Committee and a part of the insurance committee for the Reno Firefighters Association, the issues that you guys are running into with insurance and health insurance for both your active members and your retirees is the same exact problem that we're having at the City of Reno right now. The costs of health care have exponentially increased. Even with Renown and their services and the new agreement that you have with all the local governments and 13 big employers in Northern Nevada, those costs are still increasing. And the return on your investment, I'm not convinced is there. We're having the same issues with St. Mary's. We're having issues with everybody. Part of the issue we have is, here in Northern Nevada, cost of health care is almost twice as high as it is down in Clark County. And that's because of access. And now what's happening is you've got St. Mary's that's having potentially financial problems with Prime Healthcare and all those. But now you also have Renown that's almost turning into a monopoly in Northern Nevada. So at the end of the day, a question needs to be asked. How are we going to provide affordable health care, not only to your employees and your retirees, but to also the residents of Northern Nevada when you have limited access, limited providers, and the cost, all they're doing is increasing? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Anything else?
There's no one else signed in.
All right, we'll close public comment, and we will consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.